Hi everyone, welcome to our live stream series called Meet a Scientist. I'm Anjelica and I'm here in our youth BIOlab at the Albertson Research Center at St. Boniface Hospital in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And we would like to acknowledge that we are located on Treaty 1 territory, the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene people, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. In this week's live stream, we are meeting Sonu Varghese. And he currently is a master's student at the U of M and works in Dr. Jassal's cardiovascular imaging lab from the Institute of Cardiovascular Sciences, which is just a couple floors above us. We have Steve over here watching the chat, so if you have any questions for Sonu along the way, please let us know. So hi Sonu, thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Anjelica. Thank you for having me.
So at 23 years old, you are the youngest person we've interviewed so far. And in the grand scheme of things, you're not that far removed from being a high schooler like all the 30 to 60-year-olds we've been interviewing. So high schoolers watching today, we're going to get some advice from Sonu on what you can do right now to help you pursue a career in science. So first things first, you're a master's student. Can you tell our viewers what a master's student is?
Yes, of course. So with master's degrees, it's something that you do after your bachelor's, after your undergrad, and master's degrees can vary a lot in science. So first of all, there's two different types of master's degrees. There's course-based master's that you can do, which is typically 1 to 2 years, and you do it in a school setting. It's more course-based, similar to undergrad courses, where you can take these courses, and usually they're in topics like public health, global health, and it's a course-based master's. Conversely, you can also have original research, which is like a thesis-based master's, which is what I'm doing. And basically for that, what you have is you have a question that you are investigating, you generate a hypothesis, and you either do a basic science project or a clinical trial project and try to get to an answer for that question. So that's usually what a thesis-based master's is. It's usually a bit longer than those course-based masters. It's 2 to 3 years. You have to present your findings in front of an advisory committee. You publish usually a thesis at the end of that master's. So those are the two main types.
So you're not in class all day, every day. You're more in the lab doing work, finding out the answers to your questions.
Exactly. So it's just because it is a research-based master's doesn't mean exactly that it doesn't have a course component to it. So for example, at least in Manitoba for my master's program, which is a Master of Science within the Department of Physiology and Pathophysiology, you basically do take courses from September to April, and that's just a basic understanding of all general physiology. So we take cardiovascular physiology, neurophysiology, endocrine. So just the general body and understanding how it works and the pathophysiology associated with it. So you still do take courses, but outside of that, I do work mainly on my project, which is a clinical trial project. So that involves working with patients, working with nurses, doctors to recruit patients to do the study, as well as all the analysis that happens on bench work, computers, and things like that as well.
Okay, so instead of taking 5 classes a semester, you're maybe taking 1 or 2, and the rest of the time when you would normally be in class, you're doing bench work or you're talking with other healthcare providers and developing your study.
Exactly. Yeah, it's much more of a reduced course load compared to what it would be like in undergrad. It's just a couple days a week, maybe. Usually it's actually just 1 day a week. And it would be a 1.5 hour, 2 hour class. And it's just related to mainly cardiovascular physiology, because that's my field. You understand just a broad idea of the different parts of the heart and just a general understanding, which helps you in your thesis, basically.
So then normally in undergrad, you're learning things like anatomy, physiology, and sometimes you're learning things like plant anatomy, which is just a course you want to put towards your degree. You won't necessarily use it in your career. but for your master's, the classes you're taking are directly related to the research you're doing.
Yeah, that does vary a little bit. So, for example, in our master's program, since we're in the Department of Physiology and Pathophysiology, we learn about not only cardiovascular physiology and pathophysiology, we also learn about endocrine and respiratory. So we do take a little bit more of a general number of courses within the department, even though it's not directly related to cardiovascular. But for example, if you're doing a PhD, you do get a little bit more focused in taking courses that are more cardiovascular if you're doing research in cardiovascular um, physiology. So it can vary a little bit, but definitely I agree with you. It's not the same as an undergrad where you do take things like plant anatomy. It's still related to the generic field that you do research. It's pretty close. Yeah.
Gotcha. So this next question is a two-parter.
Okay.
One, how do you get to become a master's student? Like, how do you get that position? And
Right.
two, how do you come up with your research project, or does someone do that for you?
Yeah. So with the research-based masters, which is what I would be doing, it's basically at the level of a master's student in science. Usually the scientist or the principal investigator leading the study comes up with the project. They usually have the funding already secured for a project and they look for master's students. At the level of a master's student, you don't start you don't have a question, you don't come with a question. You usually interview with different scientists who already have projects that they're interested in looking at and looking for a student to get onto that project. So you interview with these scientists and you see, is this a project that I'm interested in? So for example, I was interested in exercise research and that was my previous experience in research has been in exercise. So I was looking for a project that was looking at how exercise can benefit a certain patient population. So when I was interviewing, that's what I was looking for in a potential scientist and the project that I was taking on. So that's what I found in Dr. Jassal, who was my principal investigator. And that's how you basically go about finding a supervisor, basically doing interviews with different scientists and seeing your compatibility with the lab, with the techniques that they're doing, what you're interested in looking at, because you do end up spending, 2 years, 2 or 3 years of your life on this project. So you have to make sure that it's something that you are interested in investigating.
Okay, so you don't come up with a project, but you look for a project that suits your wants.
Exactly. Yeah. And that changes when you move on to a PhD level. So after a master's, if you want to continue in academia, people do a PhD. At that point, it's more on you to decide a little bit more of the project, what you want to investigate. But yeah, at the master's level, it's more so you are basing it off of the scientists who already have the project. Yeah.
Perfect. And then when you were doing your undergrad or bachelor's degree, did you get to do any research?
Right. So, as I was alluding to earlier, I did do a bit of research in my undergrad. So, I did my undergrad at University of Western Ontario, and at that time, my degree was in a Bachelor of Medical Sciences. And in that program, what you can do is an honors thesis project, and that's pretty similar to what I understand U of M also has for undergrad. You can do a thesis project in your last year in some science degrees. And basically, what a thesis project is it allows you to do research in a lab or with a scientist to understand what the research process is like within a certain field. You can choose your supervisor and you basically have a little mini master's experience. You generate a hypothesis, you do an experiment or two, and then you collect data, you analyze that data, and you have a master's thesis that you publish at the end of, sorry, a thesis that you publish at the end of your year of research. And so I did something similar like that. At that time, it was in a respiratory lab, but I was still focused on exercise because that's something that I was interested in. And I was looking at how exercise improves lung function in older individuals. So that's what I was focusing on during my thesis project at Western. And after that, I really developed this interest in research. And that's how I kind of moved on to this project where I'm also looking at exercise, but in a different patient population.
Okay, so you got a whole 1 year of experience in your undergrad in the very last year.
Yeah.
And then same deal, someone has a project in mind, you look for one that suits your wants or your interests.
Right.
And since you got that 1 year of experience doing exercise in lungs, you can sort of carry over those techniques and knowledge that you learned in your undergrad over into your master's.
Exactly, yeah. And when you're like a young student who's just entering the field of research, so most of these I understand are high school students that are watching it. When they go on to university or late in high school, when they do start those research experiences, it will mostly be scientists with their projects, and they're joining on, they're learning these techniques that are associated with research and just learning what research is like. So most likely they won't be starting their own research question and investigating. It's more so just an idea of what research is like, figuring out what they're interested in. Yeah.
Okay, so we already have one question in our live chat.
Sure.
And it is, what is your least favorite thing about being a graduate student?
Ooh, that is a bit of an edgy question. I would say it's one of the things associated with research. It is very unpredictable. Just a general master's program, you can always get results that are not what you expect. You can have a hypothesis that you generate, and then you hope the results will be congruent to that hypothesis, but it may not be anything like what you had thought would be the results of the study. And for sure, as I think any researcher would agree with that. But I think following the data is something that is important. You have to be very honest in which the results that you get, even if it's not in line with what you hypothesized, you just kind of have to follow the data. So I think initially, as when I stepped into academia, I think that is something I struggled with, is just understanding that not everything is going to work out the way you thought it would. It's not going to be the results that you thought you would get. But I think as you do more research, what you realize is that is something that's intrinsic to research, but that's something also where you do a lot of learning. You start asking more questions about why did it go wrong? Why did you get the results that you didn't expect? Maybe there's something more to it. And all of that is just, I think, exaggerated with the pandemic too, with unpredictability in research. It's just nothing is as expected. Everything is kind of all over the place, and you just have to make sense of the data that you do get and follow it, for sure.
Exactly. Because when you're thinking of a project or that you want to do, you always have to come up with a hypothesis.
Exactly.
What is going to happen? But
Right.
like sometimes it's pretty 50-50 on whether what you guessed is going to happen or the
Exactly.
opposite.
Exactly. And like a really great scientist, what they say is, what I've noticed is just you follow the data no matter what the data you get is. So, because sometimes what you didn't expect, it turns out to be a big breakthrough, and that you just follow that data, right? Even if your hypothesis is wrong, doesn't mean the science is not good.
Exactly. Because that's kind of bad science. If you're like, I think this is going to happen, it doesn't happen, and you just keep doing things until what you think is going to happen happens.
Right. Yes.
Oh man, our chat is. Let's see. Do you work on your project just on your own?
No, so I do have a very supportive lab environment. So in Dr. Jassal's lab, we have David, who's our lab tech. We have another master's student, Cameron. And then periodically we have other students in the lab. So we had a part-time study coordinator at one point. We have BSc Med students. We have summer students. So there's a lot of support in the lab itself. And then when you go outside the lab, there is also there's other collaborators. So for example, for my study specifically, we have study coordinators here in Winnipeg, but then there's a sister site in Halifax, which also recruit for the study over there. And what we find over there is we have the same setup. There's other scientists there that help with the project. We have sonographers on our team. We have other oncologists and cardiologists on the team. So it's a very collaborative project, and there's a lot of people involved, especially in clinical trials. It's very common to have a lot of people, scientists, physicians involved in these kind of projects. So definitely not a one-man project. It takes a village.
Oh, 100%. What has been your favorite part about being a master's student?
I think it is probably just the amount of things that you learn, the independence that you develop throughout the 2 year program. I think when you are an undergrad, you expect the knowledge to come to you. You are sitting there in your lecture, and the teacher is just giving information after information, all these details on how these pathways work and all of the minutiae associated with cell biology and all of that. But in research, it's a little bit more, you have to go out there and find that information for yourself. So before you have a presentation, you have to really understand your topic of research, and you can be expected. You have to be ready for any kind of questions that they ask you. So you really have to know everything that you are presenting on before going and presenting somewhere. So you do a lot of self-learning. It's the onus is now on you to go out and learn. So there isn't that structure, but it's also liberating in that sense, because you can, if this is something that you're excited about, you throw yourself onto the project, you learn, and you just spend a lot of time just in the field learning, reading papers and attending conferences. So it's a lot of fun if this is something that you're truly passionate about.
So you love the independence,
Yeah,
and instead of learning things in school that you're not particularly interested,
exactly.
you get to learn whatever you want, what is directly related or sometimes not directly related to your
Right.
research.
Right, exactly.
Perfect. So after you're done your master's program, do you plan to continue on doing research?
Right. So for me, my personal goal is to go into medical school after my master's degree. My career goal has been to be a clinician scientist. And what that means is to spend half the time roughly working with patients in a clinical setting, and then another half of the time doing research. So for me, it's a combination of both of those that interest me, and that's why I'm doing research to get me to that career goal. But I would say for those people who are watching who are just interested in research or not sure about taking part in research, I would just say that research is just one of those things that you cannot go wrong with. It is something that if you do, it will just benefit you in terms of it just develops your skills in problem solving, critical thinking, building your networks, just all the soft skills that you learn during research, time management, planning. That is something that you can take to any career, whether it is related to academia or it's not related to academia. I think if you are in science, doing a research experience some time throughout your undergrad or after is beneficial, I would say. Yeah.
So you recommend doing some research at some point in your life, regardless of if you want to be a principal investigator in a lab or a doctor or
Exactly.
anything else related to science.
Right, exactly. I would definitely say that because I personally did not know I had this interest in research until I did start my thesis project. So it's very variable. I find sometimes people discover that they do have a passion for research by doing some small project, or they might realize, no, the research is not for me. But you only get that chance to know whether you like it or not until you get into a lab and get your hands wet with trying to get doing experiments, doing basic science or clinical trials, because some people might like basic science a lot, some people might not like that and might like clinical trials. So you do have to try out the different types of science projects and see what you like. And who knows, you might have a passion, you might not. And if you don't, it's still skills learned, networks built.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, lots of comments in the chat. Before we get to all of those comments, we need to really go over the main thing that we wanted to talk about. So
Okay.
right now, your research looks at how exercise can help protect your heart from chemotherapy in women
Right.
with breast cancer. Could
Right.
you tell us a little bit about that and how it's going so far?
Right. So basically, as you kind of just gave a brief overview, we are working with women with breast cancer who get this chemotherapy drug called anthracyclines. And this chemotherapy drug, it's very, very effective against the cancer, but it may cause some long-term issues on the heart. So what usually happens with the survival rates in breast cancer is it's getting better and better, and partly because of chemotherapy drugs like this. And they are okay after cancer, their cancer is gone, but now what you see is that they have developed these heart problems, and now instead of fighting cancer, they're fighting heart disease. So that's the issue with this chemotherapy drug. Now, in this setting, exercise has been is what we're looking at. Can exercise during the course of this chemotherapy potentially protect the heart? And the reason why we're investigating that is in preclinical models, it's been shown that yes, exercise is beneficial. Now we want to see, can we have these women who actually have breast cancer, who are getting these chemotherapy drugs, to exercise during the course of their chemotherapy. And we look at their heart before they start their chemotherapy and after this exercise program, and see whether this exercise made a difference. Did it not make a difference? Was there benefits? And our exercise program particularly is an aerobic exercise program that they do 2 times a week for a total of 24 weeks. So that's basically our general overview of the study. So we recruit women to either our exercise arm, which exercises, or we recruit them to the control arm, which means they don't exercise. And we compare the two groups and we see, okay, look at the exercise arm, they exercised, they had these benefits, or they didn't, or the control group, they didn't exercise and they had these effects. So that's basically my study.
Okay, so then maybe one more question about your research before we get into the chat.
Yeah.
Why is this chemotherapy especially bad for your heart cells and not really like your brain cells or even other skeletal muscle cells?
Right. And that's a very complicated question. It's been researched into for many years, trying to see why the heart is technically so wimpy against this like chemotherapy drug. There's a couple of different reasons why that could be. One of the things is the heart cells don't regenerate. So once a heart cell dies, it doesn't come back. So the chemotherapy drug, once it attacks and kills a heart cell, then that's gone. So that heart is already going on a downward trajectory, whereas some of the other cells in the body might regenerate and might not face the same consequences. The other thing I would say is that the heart is where there's a lot of mitochondria that's concentrated. And it seems like anthracyclines, one of their main ways, this cancer chemotherapy, one of its main ways that it acts is it impairs mitochondrial function. So with the heart having a lot more mitochondria than most of the other cells in your body, it's again another reason for the target on that heart and why it is more specifically affected compared to other organs in your body.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So the drug targets mitochondria, your
Yeah.
heart muscles, they're pumping all day, every day. If your heart
Right.
wasn't working, you'd be dead.
Yeah.
So since it needs to be working on the ball all the time,
Yeah.
it takes up lots of energy. So that's why it has a lot of mitochondria. And then
Exactly.
since it has a lot of mitochondria, that's why the drug likes heart cells a little more than like, skeletal muscle cells. And then the problem with that is when your heart muscle cells die, they don't come back.
Exactly. Yeah.
Gotcha. All right, let's dive into some of these chat questions. What skills did you improve or gain since you started your master's?
I think there's a couple of skills that I have definitely developed over the course of my master's degree. I think one of them is time management, just being able to uh, complete tasks on time, planning ahead. Because the thing with a master's program is, again, you don't have that assignment deadline or an exam date. So it's more of setting your own times and your own schedule about what needs to be done and when it needs to be done. So before, I used to be pretty last minute in terms of getting things done. And I found that actually, since I started my master's and I needed to really set my own schedule, I've just been more organized in deciding when I need to get my experiments or things done for a certain part of my project, or when I need to have met my advisory committee by. So you have a lot more independence. So organizing my time has definitely been something that I have become better at. And then also becoming more independent in terms of just taking more ownership on the work that I do, whether it's learning on my own terms and just going out of my way to read articles that are related to my field, even though nobody's asking me to do that. It's just becoming more independent and a more critical thinker is something I think I developed over the course of my master's program.
Awesome. So another comment is, as you've been in your master's for over a year now,
Yeah.
would you tell yourself something a year ago prior to starting your master's? So I guess, what kind of advice would you give to yourself a
Like a
year ago?
year ago. Ooh, that's a tough one. I think it's again kind of just alluding to what I said earlier. I think it's just kind of staying organized, having setting goals ahead of time in terms of what I hope to achieve in each month, just planning ahead in terms of this is what my project is, this is my hypothesis, what do I expect to do every month leading up to the end of my project. Just having a roadmap of where I hope to go with this project, what I hope to achieve at each kind of semester or each month of my project. I think that's something that is important because when you are in a master's program like this, there's so many distractions in terms of like a lot of science happening, a lot of exciting things that happen in research, but it can be very easily distracting if you don't know where you want to go specifically and what you hope to learn. So I would say before you enter into a master's program, really write down what you want to gain from it and make sure you're achieving those things once you do enter that master's program. It is advancing toward the career that you want or achieving that hypothesis and getting the results you are looking for.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Let's see. Man, a lot of really good questions in this chat. Maybe let's try and lump some together.
Okay.
Do you feel like your experience in your undergrad prepared you well for your master's, and what sort of extracurriculars would benefit you in your master's program?
Right. I think this is a great one because there's a lot of courses that you did take in undergrad that at the time I wondered why I was taking it. And then until I got to my master's, I didn't realize the importance of taking a course like that and the knowledge that it was building on. So for example, one course that in undergrad I was not a huge fan of was statistics. I did not like it, but then once I entered it, right, you just wonder when will I ever use a two-way ANOVA paired t-test and things like that. But once you actually enter into a master's project, you realize that statistics is crucial for any kind of data analysis, any results you get to figure out if they are important, significant. So you do need to understand a lot of the courses that you do take in undergrad in your science degrees. You don't realize how important they are until you do want to go into research. You realize, oh, actually knowing these cell biology pathways is important because they are the foundation of a lot of the different mechanisms that are involved in your research. Or knowing these statistical softwares like understanding R or Prism, that will come in handy when you're actually analyzing. And even, for example, I ended up taking a computer science media arts course in my undergrad, and that came in handy when I wanted to design a figure for my paper. So it really, you'll be surprised at the courses that you take and how that helps. But outside of that, just to touch on the extracurricular part of the question, I think any kind of leadership opportunities that you get in undergrad, it's really important to take advantage of them because it might not directly benefit whatever academia pursuit that you have, but I think all of those will help build your skill set so that you can manage your time better and just execute your project better. So for example, while I was in undergrad, I held a few positions within nonprofit organizations within the university, and I found that having to manage my courses while balancing these volunteer work that I was doing and the part-time job I was holding really helped me manage my time better. And that was critical when I entered academia, where I'm doing research now, where I have to make sure that I run all the projects that I have on time, meet my course deadlines, just taking care of everything. So I would say any leadership opportunities that come your way, take advantage of that because it will only help you. And if you're taking any courses as well, just to really pay attention in outside of just trying to get to finish that assignment or getting a good grade in the course, just really understand them because it can really come in handy down the road.
So what you're saying is keep all your notes.
Yeah.
They might come in handy someday. And any extracurricular activity while you're in school is
Yeah,
good because it helps you learn time management skills and independence in your schedule.
for sure. I 100% agree on that. Yeah.
All right, we'll do two more questions, and that's all we have time for today.
Okay.
Do you get the opportunity to interact firsthand with patients? If so, what has been your favorite patient interaction?
Oh, that's a great question. So one of the reasons why I wanted to do a master's program in this specific field was because I liked the fact that it was a clinical trial project. There was a lot of interactions with patients, and that's something that interested me from the get-go when I was interviewing for this position. And so, yes, I do interact a lot with women with breast cancer in the study, and I do enjoy, I think, almost all of the interactions. So, because of the pandemic and stuff, a lot of my conversations with them have been over the phone. And basically, it's every other week. I just touch base with them to see how the exercise program is going for these women who are getting the chemotherapy. And I find what I really enjoy during these conversations is um, these patients are very open to you about the experience of chemotherapy and how they are finding it throughout the course of their 8 cycles that they are taking the chemotherapy. They kind of confide in you about all the good, the bad that they're experiencing, and it's kind of really unique because you get a firsthand experience of their journey because you see them at the baseline before they start their chemotherapy. They're hopeful about where their chemotherapy will go, and then you get to follow them throughout their chemotherapy regimen as they go through their chemo and going in for their appointments, their good days, their bad days, and you kind of get a full picture. And they really appreciate having this one person that they checks up on them throughout the program, and they get this idea of they just kind of have a person to talk to about their experience. So even though my project has been a lot about just exercise and how that help these women, it has also changed into like really just becoming like a person that they talk to. And I think enjoy just the conversations that I do have with all of them. And I don't think I can pick just one. I think all of them have been special in their own way. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah. And then our final question today.
Yeah.
There's one that's a really good send-off question.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to a student like me who is transitioning from high school to post-secondary education?
Right. I would say one of the most important things that you can do at this stage in your life would be to find a great mentor or a supervisor in a field that you are interested in, or that you are a career that you're interested in. So for example, if I'm interested personally in becoming a clinician scientist, ideally, if at high school level I understand that's what I want to do, is to reach out to those who are doing what I want and ask them, hey, can I shadow you in whatever field that you're doing? Can I be involved in the research that you're doing? And just find those networks and those people that are doing what you want to do. And I find that will help you because you'll start to learn what you need to do now to get to where they are and get to the career that you're interested in. So I would say that's something that's really, really important about finding a mentor who's willing to supervise you, take you under their wing, teach you about how they got where they are, and to role model that behavior. And outside of that tip, I would just say taking advantage of any leadership opportunities that come their way, managing their time, planning ahead, as I mentioned earlier.
Yeah. And one thing to let the viewers know is when you're looking for a mentor, don't be afraid to just contact a bunch of people. People are always super happy to help you out, give you
Right.
information that you need, give you advice, whatever. So contact people. Don't be afraid to bug people. It'll only help you in your career.
Exactly. We have a lot of great scientists in our research center. If you reached out to any of them, they would be more than happy to give you, advice on where you want to go. And if you're keen on coming as a summer student, we have a lot of opportunities in the research center for that. So there's a lot of opportunities. It's really up to you to take advantage of those opportunities by reaching out, putting your foot through the door kind of thing. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Sonu, for joining us for our weekly Meet a Scientist interview.
Yeah.
I
Thank you
hope
for having me. I'm very excited to have this opportunity.
awesome. Thank you. So we have one more interview scheduled before the big winter break. So we're going to have Chelsea Walchuk, a registered dietitian and PhD candidate in Dr. Sue's Nutrition and Neurological Diseases Lab. And she's going to talk with Megan about how dietary fats can affect the growth and aging of your prostate. So make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for updates. Check out our new website at youthbiolab.ca and follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Thank you for watching, everyone. Talk to you next week.